And it's off topic a little bit, and I apologize for that. In 2004, you were the very first candidate I ever voted for, ever.
Wow.
And the reason that I had voted for you was because during the third presidential candidacy between you and Michael Badnarik, you had said, quote, "We don't know the truth about 9/11, do we?" And there was the end quote. And I was very much involved in advocacy for 9/11 justice, and so you were the only candidate speaking about it. That's why I voted for you. Why, in 8 years since then, has the message that we were lied to about 9/11 left your message?
Well, it's not that it's left my message, it's that, look, I will say it again. I mean, anytime it comes up, I don't know what happened on September 11th of 2001, but I know this, we are being lied to, and our government continuously lies to us. So the reason that it's not the central part of my message is because we're building a movement now for democracy in this country. I have found personally that the 9/11 movement is not a movement. It doesn't act, we haven't successfully organized people. We haven't successfully built political power around that. So, you know, it's not that it's left my, like I could easily, like there are any number of issues that I could talk about, but now I'm at Move to Amend, we are talking about a movement around the principles of how our government are supposed to operate, right? So it's not that I'm like anytime it comes up, I'm willing to have an honest conversation around it. But I have personally found that the presentation you just heard is what is engendering enthusiasm, support, and bringing people together to be able to exercise the political power that we have. So that's how I would answer that question. You're welcome. And again, I always believe in being honest with any question that's asked. I don't pander. You know, it's maybe not exactly the question. I don't suspect that's how John would have liked to have heard me answer that question, but I took the question seriously and I answered it honestly because that's what I think we ought to be doing in this country. Number two. You're going to pass. Number three.
Right here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm not a lawyer, but I do know a little bit that corporations, you know, it has certain human-like qualities, even though it really isn't one. Construct, as you say, like right off the top of my head, it pays taxes, it can be sued, which are human-type things. So, how does that fit into all this?
Well, I appreciate that question, sir. What's your first name?
Bob.
Bob?
Everybody can spell it either way.
That's cute. But you use that, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing, Bob, and to all of you, I think that Bob asked an important question, and I would answer it this way. I believe that corporations should be able to sue and be sued. I believe that corporations should have to pay taxes. I believe that corporations should be subject to the legal and political process. And here's the point, Bob. Those are all legal duties, legal privileges, legal responsibilities. They're not rights. And there is a fundamental difference. You see, a legal privilege is subject to the political process, right? But a constitutional right is not. A constitutional right is not dependent upon convincing the majority to go along or to go through any political process. In fact, if everybody else in society or in politics disagrees with my exercise of the constitutional right, that doesn't matter. I can still do it. Because, and one way to think about this, my friends, some people say it this way. Only God can endow His creation with constitutional, inherent, inalienable rights. Artificial entities, like corporations, have legal privileges that are subject to the political process. So that's how I would answer that. There's a difference between the privileges or the duties that you just described and an inherent and inalienable constitutional right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, and I think it's important, and I do, that's a very sophisticated question. I'm not saying that just to sort of praise you, but I think that, although I will, but I think it's important that we as a people start to really grapple with how our institutions are operating and why are we allowing courts to tell us that these artificial entities can overturn democratically enacted laws. It doesn't make any sense. Number three. That was three. So number four. Yes, sir.
Yeah, could you go through the process of how a constitutional amendment would go through the states?
Sure. So it's a good question, and under our Constitution, there are two ways to propose a constitutional amendment, one way to ratify it. The two different ways to propose a constitutional amendment would require either 2/3 of Congress to vote on it, or 2/3 of the state to call for a constitutional convention, at which point anything that comes out of that convention then goes to the states for ratification, and the ratification process under either one is the same. 3/4 of the state have to be ratified. Now, the answer to that question demonstrates what a heavy political lift a constitutional amendment is. And I don't shy away from that. I think you have to understand that this is not so much a legal question as it is an organizing question, as it is a cultural question. Are we going to actually be able to educate enough people to get active enough, to get involved enough, to do the heavy work of a constitutional amendment? I want to answer that question by reminding us of a couple of things. Number one, actually, the Constitution has been amended 27 times, more or less. It happens every 10 to 15 years. And you know what? Just historically, we're due. Seriously. The second thing I want to say about that is that just engaging in the process of really demanding a constitutional amendment can shift political culture, it can shift political thinking, it can shift political power. The Equal Rights Amendment of the 1970s, at its height, it did not amend the Constitution. It came dangerously, heartbreakingly close, but that work shifted the culture. Gender roles are different in the United States of America today in no small measure because the women, and some men, but mostly women, who did that work of organizing and agitating and educating people about gender and making people think about their role in society and how the legal system worked and those various legal doctrines, those all shifted. And so what I'm getting at, sir, is just by engaging in this process in a serious way, we start to shift political power in this country, and we start to expose the ruling elite for the illegitimate rulers that they actually are. And the third point I want to make about your good question about how hard it's going to be to do this is that as hard as that process is, it is no more difficult than the abolition of slavery. It is no more difficult than women being able to claim their right to vote. It's no more difficult than the uprooting of Jim Crow segregation laws or the overturning the laws that once held trade union organizers as criminal conspirators. The point I'm making is, folks, it can be done, but if and only if we actually put our shoulder to the wheel and do the work. I think a big part of the problem in America today, for most of us, we have come to be spectators in our own democracy. And it's time for us to get involved. Yep. And yes, it's going to be hard work, and I say it's joyous work. It's beautiful work. It is the goddess's own work, and we should do that work with a happy heart and recognize, yes, it's going to be hard, but you know what? What else are you going to do? Television is just a lie anyway. Come out in the real world. It'll be much better. Number 5.
No, I'm number 4.
4, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Comment and a question.
Yes, sir.
Interchanged. It's my opinion that the solution to this is repeal of the income tax law. If we look at it, and I give the founding fathers a lot of credit, they said, no, the federal government, and that's, you can say government is limited, but they meant the central government is limited. And they said the central government shall not tax the individual citizens of the states. All right, that went on forever and ever and ever until finally it came out. You can trace all of the problems to the implementation or the amendment allowing the federal government to tax the individual citizens of the states. And what has happened is it's given the corporations and the very wealthy the right to manipulate the tax laws so that the 99% or the middle class have no representation. Recently, somebody brought up, hey, about a revolt, no taxation without representation. I say that's exactly what the middle class has now, taxation without representation. So if we got in a twit, 250 years ago, let's get in a twit today. But For years, I have been saying, trying to tell people, corporations are not people. They do not have the same rights. Because corporations get favored treatment through the tax system. The tax system says that you deduct what's ordinary and necessary. Corporations can deduct anything and they can manipulate.
Including fines that they paid for violating the law.
But people do not have that right.
How about that?
Is food ordinary and necessary to a person? Yes. So corporations can depreciate their assets. We've always said, well, our body's not an asset, we can't depreciate it. But now that they have said corporations are people, let's turn it around and say, okay, either corporations have the same requirements that people do, or people have the same benefits that corporations do. But I have for years said the reason corporations should be taxed, not people. Because corporations get the special benefit of limited liability. They can operate, and if they damage the public, there's only a certain amount. An individual, if he damages the public, he loses everything. So it's been my theory that that's the price the corporation pays for that benefit. So hold them to it. But coming back to it, and my question is, why in the hell is the general public not seeing this? But it is because the very wealthy and the large corporations have the ear. They own every one of our, not everyone, I don't want to exaggerate. They do not own everyone, but they own so many of our elected officials that we have no voice. Every bit of special legislation is coming on behalf of wealthy individuals and large corporations. We have no representation.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, that was a very sophisticated and complex case that you built, and I appreciate you making those comments. I thought, and so since you didn't bring it up, I will just sort of also toss in there, and also abolish the Federal Reserve, which is actually a private banking, bunch of private banking corporations. It's not actually even controlled democratically by we the people.
May I tell you that that's why we won't succeed. We pick something and we win it. We don't say, here's what we need to do, and also we have to do this, and also we have to do this, and we split our forces. If the Federal Reserve can come later,
Okay.
you correct the tax system, everything else will fall in place.
Okay, so I guess what I would say is this, that move to amend, calling for the constitutional amendment that we're calling for, is actually beginning to grow. We have over 220,000 people who are actively participating. We've passed 300 resolutions across this country. We put it on the ballot in 7 jurisdictions, winning every single one of them by supermajorities, including in traditionally Republican strongholds. We're going to be on the ballot in another 20 communities. We expect to have 500,000 people actively participating. We've got over 100 chapters, and I will say gently, and just as a little nudge, I don't think we have a Richmond, we have a Northern Virginia chapter. Do we have a Richmond?
We have a Richmond, yeah.
Oh, y'all did! Yay! All right, I didn't have, my apologies. Yeah, I'm on the road so much, Alan, so I apologize. I'm glad to know. So that's good. So we can add Richmond to that list. But here's the thing. I really believe that we're in the burgeoning stages of a democracy movement. I don't think that I don't think about it, sir, as in splitting forces so much as people are beginning to have these kinds of conversations about, do we have the power to do X, Y, or Z or not? And so the Move to Amend campaign is not an issue. We're about the principles of how the Democratic Republic operates. So that's kind of how I would answer that question. Now, the question that you, or respond to the comment, but the question you asked around why don't the American people know, I think it's pretty obvious. Number one, the corporate media is lying to us. The corporate media is intentionally trying to bamboozle us. The corporate media is part of the problem. Again, zoom in on me over here, because if you're watching this and you stayed with us, and for those of you who are watching it, I'm glad you did stay with us, just recognize that the only reason you're hearing this is because it's non-corporately filtered media content that David decided to help put up there and put it out. So don't hate the media, become the media. Secondly, all of you in this crowd, you watching, use the Facebook and Twitter and let people know about www.movetoamend.org and encourage them to join. The last thing I'll say is this, very quickly in response, sir. Let's just acknowledge the truth of what this gentleman said. Principled liberals have been lied to and sold out by the leadership of the Democratic Party under the behest of corporate America. Just as surely as principled conservatives have been lied to and sold out by the leadership of the Republican Party at the behest of the corporations and ruling elite. I think principled liberals and principled conservatives, we may have disagreements on individual issues, but I think we can find common ground on the principle of a democratic republic. That we the people are sovereign, we the people have the right to create the society that we want to live in. We may debate over how those laws or what those laws should actually look like, but the one thing we're going to agree on is that the majority can never violate the individual constitutional rights of a person, and corporations are not persons. When you say it that way, we can really come together. Who's number 5? Yes, ma'am.
I'm just going to what you're saying about how our media blocks out a lot of information going on in other countries. I was watching Democracy Now! Last week, and there's this, just this huge situation is rocking Spain right now, and it was a grassroots movement that was actually influenced by the American Occupy movement. And finally, one of these top CEOs in one of the largest banking scandals in Spain, just like here, is finally having charges brought against him and going to be going to jail. Not one of these top CEOs in this country has gone to jail, who has, helped bring down our entire economy. And it all started off with a grassroots movement inspired by American Occupy movement from the ground up. They didn't wait for the leaders to go after these, and I think there's going to be more CEOs. It's just this one top guy, I can't remember his name. And it's been all over the news in Europe, but I haven't heard one thing on CNN.
How about that?
Or the network news in this country.
Gosh, I wonder what that's about. So here's the thing. I see. Yeah, we'll do another one real quick. Let me just finish this. So, ma'am, first of all, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's an inspiring story, and it goes back to my very beginning. There is a movement happening across the world.
Toppling the king, or
exactly. So, but here's the other point I want to make, because I think you have to be courageous about this. The same thing happened in this country. And actually, there was the beginning of a movement. And many state attorney generals were actually beginning the investigative process. And it does not, I do not say this with glee, but I think that we have to acknowledge this. Barack Obama stopped that investigation. Barack Obama actually instructed the U.S. Attorney General to stop the investigation, forced the state attorney generals to stop the investigation, and cut a deal giving immunity to all of those people for any laws that may have been violated. That's the truth. I'm sorry?
How did you find that?
Might be back there.
All right.
How do you know that? I mean, I haven't heard that. And
If you actually just do an internet search on this exact subject, and you'll find out. And it was recorded. I actually first heard about it on Democracy Now! By the way, it was about 6-8 months ago. And it was the beginning of attorney generals who were initiating investigations, and they were just civil charges at that point. They weren't yet criminal, but the Obama administration squashed it. So who's number 6? Yes.
I had a question.
We'll do another one. Were you 6?
No.
Okay. We'll do this one, then we'll do one more round. Yes, sir.
I had a question about money not being synonymous with free speech. Okay, I'm just kind of doing devil's advocate here. Okay, let's say I won the Powerball and I want to spend all that money to give to politicians that would put an end to the war in Afghanistan. How is that not a free speech issue? if I wanna spend all that money.
What I would say is this, that money is property, it's not speech. And the way you just described it, the way our country is currently operating, it's not a First Amendment free speech issue, it's actually a 14th Amendment equal protection issue. Because if money is really just speech, the way you just described it, it means only those with the millions can actually speak in any way because you drown out all the rest of us. The point is that the way you just said it, money allows you to buy microphones and amplifiers and systems that just drown out normal people's voices. So I don't think that it's an exercise of free speech rights. I don't care if you're doing something I agree with or disagree with. Personally, if we're going to have a functioning democratic republic and actually fair elections, I would say this: publicly funded elections. Like, just get all the money out of the process. Get all the union money out, all the corporate money out, all the wealthy money out, and just create a process by which we can actually have discourse and debate. Oh, and by the way, because the airwaves belong to the public, if they're still in the common domain, that the corporations are only licensing it from us, then force 30 minutes of airtime, in blocks, reestablish the fairness doctrine. There's all sorts of ways that we could create systems by which we could have a functioning discussion and discourse. But no, I don't believe, whether you're doing things that I would agree with or disagree with, that ability to spend unlimited amounts of money is the exercise of free speech.
I just have a little follow-up. What if, say, instead of putting that money into politicians, what if I just put up, just bought up a whole bunch of billboards and signs like New York City to end the war, instead of actually giving that money to campaigns? Is that the same thing?
Well, what I would say is that now you're not actually talking about engaging in campaigning and electioneering, so it's a different idea. So, anything, the devil's in the details. But if you look at, did you get the brochure that I passed out? Because I know you came a little late. So turn it over on the back, and you'll see our proposed amendment. And our proposed amendment is just very clear that section number 2, that local, state, and federal governments have the authority and the right to pass laws to protect the integrity of the election process. Section 3, none of the rest of the First Amendment and free press issues would be affected at all. So let's do one more quick round, and then we're going to leave. I want to make sure anybody who hasn't asked. So 1, 2, Alan, number 3, number 4, and then we'll come to John as number 5. Thank you for coming, man. Number 1. Yes, sir.
I share some of the concerns in the last questioner. Without going into details of that, I am very much in support of move to amend the first part of the Constitution.
Corporations don't have constitutional.
Corporate person. I don't find myself agreeing, we don't have to go into the reasons why, but I have a question about what I should do, where my part would be. I don't agree with the amendment as it's written right now against using money to buy basic media time, basically. I mean, money isn't speech, is a good rhetorical device, but that's not really what the legal decision of Citizens United versus FTC.
It is what Buckley versus Vallejo said.
Right. But that's not, okay, regardless, that's not what I want to support.
Okay.
And where is a place for me exactly? Because I'm very much in support of the first half amendment, very much not in support of the second half. I think an individual person should be able to spend exorbitant amounts of money.
Okay.
I should be able to buy all my billboards saying vote for this candidate and not this candidate. I have no problem with that. So what's my place in this if now I feel like one of the politicians trying to decide on a bill where someone's written something into it and I'm like, oh God, I really love that, but not the second half.
I guess since you've asked it, I do want you to take a look and turn that brochure over and just look at what our proposed amendment is. Did you get one?
Yeah, I got the.
Okay. Oh, so you already know. Right. So in that case, I guess what I would say is this, and again, this is just being very candid with you and explicit. Yeah. That is the Move to Amend movement.
Right.
And I don't know of any group that's just saying, just deal with corporate constitutional rights, but people, the wealthy, can still spend unlimited amounts of money in elections. I personally don't know of a single organization or effort that's doing that. So since you've asked me that question that way, my honest answer is I don't know.
So, and then my concern is a similar concern to the man in the yellow shirt is, are we we doing too much with that? Because I've spoken with other people that are in my boat and said, or they're confused, they're not sure, or some people are in the opposite boat. So maybe, you're alienating people if you just pick one, but it's your key presentation was on that first part of the amendment.
Yes.
And then you said, and money excuse me, so you guys don't like that? Okay, me either, good, okay, let's go. But, I mean, that, you
Okay.
can talk about that, you can make a case for it, and maybe, maybe lots of people in here and agree with that, and maybe people all over the place, but I'm at a loss, and
I don't know what to tell you about your loss, and I don't mean to, I'm not being flip.
No, I know.
I'll tell you this, the reason I went through that whole history is because most people don't know the history of corporate constitutional rights. So it takes a time to unpack that and give us the opportunity now for this discussion around that core issue. I will tell you this, sir, that the doctrine that money equals speech, you may agree with it, and that's fine, but I will tell you this, that was created by the courts too in Buckley versus Vallejo. Up until 1976, no court had ever said that. In fact, it was an actual felony in almost every state to even use corporate money to try to influence elections. In Wisconsin, you could go to jail for 20 years just for using corporate money to try to influence elections. So that's a new phenomenon, relatively speaking, right? So
it's corporate.
right? All right.
And I agree with money is not equals free speech, but in that the ability to spend money as you want should be protected under the equal rights privileges.
Okay.
Right, 14th Amendment, but
You're
you're conflating two entirely separate issues.
No,
in the amendment. They're not.
They're 1 and 2. For me, they're not separate because I am not willing to do the work that I do if it were just about corporate constitutional rights and that still the wealthy can spend unlimited amounts of money. That's my personal position. It's also the position of the hundreds of thousands of people and growing in this movement. And I guess I would say this, and I say it with sincerity, if you would like to create a different effort, then you should do so. You have the right to do that. But me and my colleagues, we know where we stand, and we're trying to educate and agitate and organize around that position.
And so this movement has no room for, this is a question, this movement has no room for discussion of altering that proposed amendment?
I guess what I would say is this, that the ship has already sailed around that.
Okay.
I mean, honestly.
Okay.
Number 2. Yes.
I feel like this question needs to be asked even more so given the little thing you gave us in between the first 5 and the second 5 in the sense of the investigations being squashed and yada, yada, yada. My question was kind of focusing in 2 directions, but the same kind of dynamics or concerns. You talked about the need for this 1-2 punch and not having to redo the work because the cat got out the other door, kind of hitting the front door and the back door on the perversion and the wholesale undermining of the original intent of our country, of our founding fathers. How do we, especially as we pick up steam, how do we prevent the response to co-opt, to own, to shape the direction of the amendment in ways that are counter to what we want, but we know as the work is being done, as the momentum picks up, as the public support starts, you talked about the women's rights and the ERA. Well, that was small poker stakes. The stakes are much higher for them on this than it was with ERA. And if you think, or anybody here thinks, that we're going to waltz up to the door and take our language through, I mean, the process of who ultimately has to approve all of this are the people that are owned lock, stock, and barrel. I'm sorry, the gentleman there said they own all of them, and then he backed down and said, no, they not only own all of them, but they own all of them that want to be elected, or 99% of those who want to be elected. They own it all right now. What are we to do with that reality?
I guess I would say the same thing that every movement before us have done. You know, again, like what you've described is an assessment, and the assessment, look, to be an abolitionist in the 1840s was to be tarred and feathered, beaten, spit upon, degraded in every single way. And yet those people persevered because they knew in their hearts that it was a depraved institution, and that they knew that it was not right, and that they were going to be part of changing it. The same is true of the women's suffrage movement, and I want to actually go a little deeper, Alan, and actually remind folks of this. In Seneca Falls, the meeting where the women's, where we are taught the women's suffrage movement was born, do you know that there was a fierce debate in Seneca Falls? And the debate was between those people who believed that this should be a human rights movement, and that therefore that movement should be demanding the abolition of slavery through peaceful means, and the guaranteeing of equal rights for women under all circumstances. There was another group of people who wanted to be practical and said, oh, that's too hard, we can never do that, so let's just be about women's right to vote, and then we can, if we just get the women's right to vote, we can make some changes this way. The point I'm making, Alan, is not to degrade that debate or so forth, but to learn from it and to say, we should not compromise before the fight really begins. We should actually be for what we're for from the jump. And what I am for is a functioning democratic republic where we the people are sovereign. And there can be debates about what this means. And at the end of the day, I am reminded of what Gandhi told the Viceroy of India, the most powerful military at that time, even more like, and was in utter and complete control. And the Viceroy, in frustration and disgust, told Gandhi, do you know who and what we are? Do you expect us to just leave? And do you know what Gandhi said?
Yes.
Yes. At the end of the day, sir, you will simply leave. And here's the thing. I think, as big a stretch as it is, that I think that we should think of it this way. Those people who are the ruling elite, who have control of the elected officials, who are hoarding money and power, those people actually think that they're doing good because, you know, I'm so important as they shave. And they're almost all shaving. Let's just acknowledge that. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I'm so important, they think, as they look in the mirror. Everybody else should just be so grateful. They should be kissing my, they should be bowing down before me. You know, and they should be grateful for what I do. And honestly, that is at best delusional. Most clearly, the decisions they make are destroying the planet. They're mentally ill.
Yes.
If we had a compassionate society, we would get them help. Instead, we put them in charge. So yes, it's going to be hard to go through this cultural shift, but I don't know how else to answer it, Alan, by saying I do my best to be honest, I do my best to be persuasive, and I do my best to tell the truth, even as Audre Lorde said, if that truth sometimes makes me tremble. Even if it's hard to say out loud, I speak my truth, and I speak my truth to everybody who I can get to listen, and I trust that other people will do that. And at the end of the day, I don't take responsibility for winning. I take responsibility for doing my part.
Yes.
And that's all the responsibility I'm going to take. That's the only way I know how to answer. It's a hard question you've asked. I don't know how else to answer it.
Well, the reality is that your answer is for the citations that you gave of the abolitionists. You do what you do because it needs to be done, not because you think you can win, not because you think you're going to get your way. You do it because it has to be done. And the most powerful movements always move forward when it is impossible, and it is improbable, it is unlikely, and it is doomed without any possibility from the beginning.
You know, I appreciate that.
Those biggest successes that have happened on the planet have those conditions attached to them from the start. Does anybody think that this country could have been formed if it was going to be easy? They took on the mightiest military machine ever created on the planet to that day, and they took them down.
You know, thank you, Alan. We got to stack it. I want to finish it up, but it occurs to me, you know, Gandhi, we mentioned him. Gandhi said there's a simple 4-step solution to this level of systemic change. First, you work for systemic change, and they, the ruling elite, will
refuse.
They will completely ignore you. But you keep doing your work for social change so you can move to number 2, and that is where the ruling elite will laugh and mock you. But you keep doing your work for social change so you can move to step 3. They fight you. And you keep doing your work for social change so you'll move to step 4. You win. And you know what? Gandhi forgot step 5. And I say this with humility, but Gandhi did forget to actually articulate step 5. You know what step 5 is? Step 5 is when everybody who said it was impossible will now say that was inevitable.